Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so grateful to be here for Ascension in the Raw with Annette. Thank you so much, Annette. And I'm stoked. Today is episode 7. Very sacred number. Sacred 7, Neptune rulership of this degree. Definitely feels like we're getting into some deep terrain here. And always want to reflect on the synchronicity of when we do get to do our show together is like the cosmos is and the universe is aligning the entire ride. So today, we are going to encapsulate this energy as we do in the quantum with these calls. So whether you're here with us live or you're here on the replay or you're here 5 years from now, this energy is here for you of a total reset, a reset button on many, many levels, and the opportunity to kind of jump into a whole other timeline, all this stuff. And it's essentially the great way to try to consolidate, like, how pattern disrupt. We're going to be actively disrupting patterns. We have been, and there's the opportunity with that energetic. And today I'm really excited with what we're going to talk about. It's so synchronistic. So Annette and I last week, I had mentioned, what do you think about aspects? And then she added in a very crucial component to go along with this is judgment, aspects and judgment. So the official like title or subject of the show today, aspects of ego, soul, consciousness, and heightened divine unity consciousness or neutral consciousness, along with judgments on the path of awakening. So I wanted to just read a little bit about the atomic support that's coming in for us, this cosmic support from on high. When I talk about that reset button and like the pattern disrupt energy, I just wrote a few words down to kind of get everyone into this energy with us. And first, I want to just invite you to take a pause, take a few breaths. Let's ground in, really start to feel our bodies, allowing ourselves to arrive in our bodies, center and breathe, and invite yourself to be present. And we both thank you so much for being here with us. It's an honor to be here with you all. And also the invitation to take your attention to your alta major chakra. It's where the skull connects in with cervical spine. You can kind of feel like that dent in there. And see golden solar sun disk there at the back of the head, just helping you to clear, just helping, moving the energy around. We've all been going through a lot, and that ultra major clearing, if you just pack on, envision a beautiful golden solar disk spinning at the back of the nape of your neck, you're going to notice it's going to assist you, right? As there's a lot that is surrounding us and that we are clearing and going through as well. So wanted to bring in that activation. All right, so here we go. Amazing cosmic codes today, frequency support from on high, which is a huge template wipe, a starting over opportunity if you want, if you feel that call. A refresh button to jump timelines to write a new mythic saga of your journey. Purify the old stories with regards to love and what love is on all levels, and what communication is, and your identity, and telling a new story which supports your next level. So this is an amazing opportunity to reprogram your reality once again. With the heart is the guide. The heart is the guide and the filter for this process. So there's the opportunity for you to have a new plan and a new vision. And this really ties in. How amazing that the astrology is assisting us with this. As always, we always find these amazing synchronicities that whatever's going on in the cosmos is exactly what we're experiencing on multiple levels here. And how perfect that this ties in with aspects of consciousness, because boy, we have a lot to cover with that. And judgments comes in at every step of the way here of this. So very excited for our topic today, and thank you. And I will pass it to you, Annette, wherever you want to start.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for that little anchoring exercise to kind of anchor everybody back in, because it is a very wild ride since really since the equinox. If I got to trace mine back, it probably started around the equinox. Right? Yeah, spring equinox. I usually get it confused. I'm like, which one is it? Yeah. So you definitely start to feel a lot of stuff. And normally by this time of the year, when we starting really now getting to just be linear for a little while to talk about linear year, usually by March of each linear year, you start getting boots on the ground of what you're going to be doing. And sometimes you kind of know it ahead of time, but you're still kind of clearing out the year before with stuff. You're starting to get into some new stuff, but you haven't really began it yet. So for me, I've just started seeing some of the new stuff I needed to be doing start to trickle in, where I could really kind of focus in on what was 25 going to be about, and what was I going to be doing and what was I not going to be doing. And I think sometimes the hardest parts can be the what we're not going to be doing, because that is where the judgment comes back in. That is where we start to think about, well, but I've always done that. And in our human consciousness, we kind of always kind of did the same things. There was that old saying, nothing ever really changed. And in human consciousness, nothing ever really does change. And we get like a little bit of a spin-off of something, but it's still the same. We don't tick up enough in frequency to change anything. We kind of keep everything going around the same all the time. Even though we feel like it's a teeny bit different, it doesn't really shift enough to really shift the reality out of human consciousness. So a lot of us start to go through around this time of year. I feel like judgment really starts to hit hard on what we have to kind of let go of, because the new stuff has to come in, and the new stuff can't come in when the old stuff is still there. And we talked about the leaves on the trees in that analogy, where eventually the longer those leaves hold on, the new growth just pushes them off. And so many of those leaves still kind of hold on until the spring, and then they just get pushed off anyway. So it's going to have to go anyway or get reprioritized. And that can be a difficult thing to do when we have always done certain things. So I know for me, I've had a lot of stuff and even I can find myself trying to keep it going because I don't want to not do it. But it's like every time I try, it just gets worse and worse. So it's like you just get out of the flow with it. We have this misconception. The humans always want to take the easy route. Our human consciousness always wants to go the easy route. Our human consciousness wants to do what's easy, right? And that's true. And then we have this flip that will say, well, this is supposed to be easy, because a lot of times we talk about ascension, we talk about taking that easy path, taking the road that is the flow, where you're in flow. But being in flow doesn't mean it's easy. It just means you're in flow. Doesn't mean you're not judging maybe what you're doing or what you're not doing. It just means you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. It doesn't mean it's easy for a human to do that. It just means that's what you're supposed to be doing. So go do that. Usually it's not the easy thing to do. And my camera, it's not the easy thing to do. It's just what you're supposed to do. So judgment comes in all along the way. We judge everything. We judge other people, or we judge ourselves, because we don't even wait for anyone else to judge us. We just do that on our own and pretend like everyone else is judging us because of certain things we're going through. So I'm going to kick it back to you. I'm going to let you go from there for a bit and see where we want to go.
Oh, great. Thank you, Annette. So what I wanted to do, because like all of our topics are so big, is segment it into a few little pieces here. And so I kind of want to start almost with the journey, and how our journey of becoming and awakening and ascension, how it all starts. Well, it all starts with the first level, the first self concepts at the human level. When we talk about the ego aspects, the human ego aspects. So I've got a couple keywords here. Ancestral trauma, or the trauma from the human life of the experiences that we had, right? Also being reactive, so building a whole identity and behavior system, all this behavioral modification, that's basically our ability to cope with being here in society, in these bizarre human realms and concepts and constructs and limitations. Also, so survival, right? So these are the aspects, the initial aspects that we spend a lot of time clearing, a lot of energy, emotional clearing. So the survival programming. The big one is the saboteur, because that is an aspect that's going to continue to be kind of piggybacking many different layers of your expansion of consciousness. Is as the self concept continues to evolve for a lot of the journey, we still have self doubt, right? Or I don't know, like I think that this is delusional. Like the saboteur element of the ego consciousness tries to come in and derail or put us down or throw us off. And there's a lot of different ways to kind of personify that. It depends on what kind of languaging really works, for you. Some people will call it the demon of fear, the demon of self-doubt, the demon of whatever. Like, I like to use strong language because it will assist me to really pay attention. And that will change for all of you, where you are in your process of what really works. But the negative self-talk, the self-judgment, like Annette was saying, like we are our biggest judge. And just know that the judgment piece is one that will be with us for many different forms as we're evolving these different aspects of self. Are we doing it right? We're transcending the initial judgment maybe that we felt as we were growing up from society or parents or whatever. And then as we grow up and we're not around them, or we are around them, but we're grown, we realize that we're the ones echoing all of that judgment onto ourselves with the self-critical or negative self-talk, like the put downs of self. Um, and this is just really important to be aware that for so long of the journey, judgment is there because we're going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's just really good to have like an accurate understanding or somewhat of a concept that this is a many years long process of deprogramming. And what's cool is as you make space of the initial aspects of wounded and separation and trauma kind of stuff, and you're expanding your self concept, then you're starting to do your best to balance it in with love and care, and also then higher consciousness aspects start to come. But in the meantime, this whole process, as we're calibrating into more and more self-awareness, which is a combination of simplifying who we are and also expanding who we are as divinity, as universal consciousness, as light itself, right? That judgment piece is still going to be in there for a long way of the process, and it will change forms, and it will, so you always have to be super aware and listening with your heart, of that, the who, what, when, where, why kind of questions, who said that. Very, very important as we are balancing different aspects, and some we're letting dissolve entirely, new ones we're gestating and fostering and growing like a garden. There's like so much happening all at once, right? So I wanted to make sure to just cover the very first, like, foundational layer of aspects that we are deprogramming, which is the human experience first, where we felt small, had a negative or not positive self concept. And then we'll keep going. So I will pass it back to you, Annette.
Oh, what's funny is your definition of aspects and mine are a little different because I'm like, oh, I don't know that's what we're talking about. Those are what I would, I guess when I think about aspects, I'm thinking about galactic aspects. I'm thinking about different aspects. I guess human aspects we're trying to clear, which I guess that's where you're coming in from the angle you're coming in at, which I always think it's fun because when everyone explains it a different way, it kind of opens it up a different way for me when someone else says it, and I'm like, oh yeah, I never thought of it like that. Because I can remember, how you start, right? And you start thinking you can live an ascended life and keep all your human shit. All this stuff stays here, but I'm gonna live up here. But none of this is gonna change. There was an old Seinfeld. My parents watched Seinfeld all the time, the reruns, and it was an old Seinfeld where they were talking about we got to keep this, but then we're gonna do this over here, but this can't change. We're gonna bring this in, but this is gonna stay exactly the same because this is okay. Even if it's not okay, we think it's okay, because they're humans, we don't really know it's not okay. Everyone else's life is just as fucked as ours. So we don't sit there and go like, oh no, mine's better than that. Or sometimes maybe we do that. Well, it's not that screwed up. It's better than that. So it's okay. We just want to bring all this other, we just want to, yeah, that's very good, Corey. It is. It's like, it is ascension bargaining. I'll bring this in, but I'm going to keep this. This is okay. Because we don't realize none of it's okay. And I'll tell you, some of the videos that get the most traction on my channel are ones about decoding relationships because everyone has relationships they're trying to keep, and you don't want to break it to everyone that majority of them are going to go. That's just reality. It doesn't mean you can't transcend some, but that has been few and far between in my experience. That literally they more like I think you said it even before we got online, Marissa, that the frequency gets so, you get so far away from each other in frequency if they're not on the same road you're on, and they're just on a different timetable. And that's really all it is, on a different timetable. Everyone's ascending one way or the other. Either they're going to ascend through death, or they're going to ascend in the body. That's how it's going to be, and that's kind of how it works, and very few survive. And I can tell you one of mine has survived, and that's with a child. That's a relationship with a child. And a lot of people who are parents understand that that is kind of a different, it's energetically rooted in something else. And that is why I feel like that, they keep going, where because the children are more open to change, and the children they accept things a lot easier than adults do it. And they're just in a different frequency in general. But other than that, all mine have disappeared, and some have shifted a little bit, but they're not going to stay. You can look at them and tell. And then on the flip side, you have these people that you don't even know how they're still there, because you think you've transcended, because they're usually, when you look at, if we take an aspect in the sense that you're describing it, I would remember looking at a person, and they were so human, so selfish, so caught up in themselves. And I would spend a lot of my day with them. And because we were neighbors, and we do a lot of stuff together. And I just remember thinking, how are you in my life? I don't understand how you're still here, because I understood enough at that point. Like, so this is a decades long journey, really. I understood enough that said you can't be in my life if we don't have some kind of common reality, common frequency. I'm still holding something of this, or you wouldn't still be here. And what took me a while to realize is it what I thought was not changing, it would do some big shifts, and all of a sudden everyone moves apart a little bit, or people move away and people move closer together, or people move away again. But you do start to see it shift. And you do start to see where you just don't care. You just don't care anymore. And that can take years. It's that old adage I would always say when people are divorcing, when you're still fighting over the furniture, and you're still fighting over everything. It's like, you're not unhappy enough yet. When you get unhappy enough, you don't give a shit about the furniture. You leave the keys in the door and walk out. Speaking from someone who went through a divorce in her human life, you don't care. If you're still fighting over the little stuff, you're not unhappy enough yet. And your human's going to get really unhappy before it's going to just walk away. But in ascension, it kind of flips, where you don't even get to the unhappy part. You just get to the part where it just doesn't matter anymore. You've kind of grieved it too. And there's another experience. I know a lot of people who've gone through a human divorce. Well, a lot of times by the time you actually sign the papers, you're kind of over it, because you've spent years going through the breaking of the bond, that human bond, which our soul doesn't care about anyway, but our human was wrapped up in. And by the time you sign the papers, it doesn't matter anymore. And I think a lot of these aspects, especially these human aspects, by the time because you've transcended them so much within yourself, there's nothing left to grieve. You've finally you've got so little of it left inside of you, they can't be in your frequency anymore, because they're too far away from where you are. And by the time you get to the next phase, you don't care. You just flat out don't care. But to humans, that's kind of cold. And to humans, they don't understand that. And they take that real personal, and it's not so much you don't really care about them. And I know it's going to sound how I just said that. It's not so much you don't care about them. You just see the hopelessness of the future of it. It has no future in that timeline, in that moment. Doesn't mean it can in another timeline. I always preference that when I talk to people about relationships. It doesn't mean it's a dead end everywhere. It's just a dead end right here. It's not going anywhere. It doesn't mean, 2 years from now, everyone's in a different timeline. You're going to be in a different timeline, a different aspect of them. But how long will it take them to get there? And are you going to wait around for that? And that's where a lot of the giving things up, and the people is the worst thing. But very few, when you look at the people in your life, I'm going to pass it back to you, Marissa. How many of them are still left than when you started? besides your child, which is like besides the child, what do we got? Even my cats have turned over through that. One died, and I waited a couple years and got another one. I mean, it's because pets are big into. We talk about people. Pets are huge in us and linking us to timelines. And it's funny. I remember anytime anyone would have a big life change, usually a pet leaves, it dies, or you get a new one. Whether kids go to college, you get married, you get divorced, all of a sudden that animal is rooted in that other timeline. It's a different aspect of you. I always look at that animal as a different aspect of you. And when that aspect is gone, the dogs or the cat or whatever, fish, bird, gotta go too. And then you get another one, and everyone's like, "Oh, their personality is so different. That animal's personality is so different because it's a different aspect of you. They're mirroring back something else of you." But if you watch close enough, you'll see that animal start to mirror back another one of those other animals of you. That's something they used to do because it still kind of can be there a little bit, but they're still just parts of you. They just mirror back your strongest part at that time. Whatever you're going through. So, all right, I'm gonna kick it back to you.
I love how we weave because where I'm going is galactic and all that stuff. So we layer it so organically together. So I'm like, I love it. I love our flow. And I love how you brought in the animals and the pets. It's brilliant and the relationship. So thank you. Um, so how I'm presenting this, I'm breaking it down basically into 3 parts to simplify. So we talked about, the human experience, which is honestly the one that we spend the most amount over the years, deeper and deeper layers of that come up, right? And I love what Corey said, just cuddle with judgment for a few years until that abandons you too. And it's great because the least resistance we can have, and there's going to be times where we do have resistance on purpose because there's only so much we can take. And so it's really about just honoring that no matter how gnarly or fucked up it gets, it's all divinely perfect. And the painful stuff, the uncomfortable stuff, it will pass too. Everything is, there's the impermanence. That's a very divine and almost like tantric way of looking at our experience here. Inhale, exhale, right? Coming and going, building and breaking down. Like, so the human is the first piece. The next piece I want to talk about, which is where Annette took us, I was kind of like framing it as like, okay, so we have the first experience, super 3D human experience, all this strife and suffering and drama. And then we go into the soul starting to filter through soul aspects. And so what I started to include into that category for some little buzzwords here, starting to explore our mission or being curious about our mission or our higher calling and purpose, expanding our identity into this soul identity. So the beyond the human life now, like another little layer, like 4D kind of, 4D is opening up and we're like, oh, well, wait, there's more, but what is it? And who am I? And so beyond human life stories, right? Galactic, past lives, angelic or archangelic kind of legions coming in, all these other starting to go more metaphysical, also superhero, soul aspects. And it's like this catalytic sparking of these rememberings or inspirations. I mean, you could get really activated by a movie. Like I was bringing the superhero movies, so all of a sudden these soul aspects start to come on, and it's like there's like this threshold that you have to just hang the fuck on when you're really going through a lot of the deeper human aspect where it's like, I know I'm more than this. I know I came here for more than this, and there's this like ferocious tenacity, hanging on, like being willing to keep going through and keep kind of pushing through this membrane that then we bust through into more, and then it's a whole other can of worms. And then when we talk about the judgment piece, that's going to be here for when these more dimensional aspects are coming on as well, because then we're going to have galactic history, and oh, the sacred feminine, the sacred masculine, and like all these different levels of drama and scripts, that are kind of put into all of these. And so there's more deprogramming and more expansion and more simplification again, and eradicating judgment again, and seeing, oh, wow, you see how much we pull the human judgment, through all of these different layers of the process because we came here for the human experience, and we're cleaning it up and we're neutralizing it a little bit. Um, so along with that soul aspect, then you start to remember these mastery aspects, and so you can almost imagine like we're stair stepping up, Maslow's hierarchy is another great example of this, or the Hawkins scale. We are calibrating ourselves out of density and into higher frequency, but meanwhile, they're all kind of bleeding through. So there's a constant cleanup happening. And the judgment pieces are coming again for every single one of those. And you have to discern not only what's true for you, versus, oh, well, this source and this channel said this about galactic history, and then this one said this, and I feel this, or, so it's a lot of discernment and navigating, starting to connect with these core qualities, of your essence, of your soul, like starting to simplify. And yet there's still a lot to be cleaned up, if you will, right? So I will pause it with that, and kick it back to you, Annette, and then we'll keep going. There's always more.
No, the cat heard me. Their ears were ringing, so he wanted to come in. I could just hear pat pat. I was like, it's just gonna get stronger. I might as well let him in. He's just gonna continue to butt his head against the door. Um, no, it's funny when you talked about the soul aspects, when you got to that subset for you, that's more where I guess I start to think about higher aspects. I guess I don't really even though I guess I know they're there, the lower aspects. I don't think at the time when I was noticing them, I thought of them in that way. I think it probably took me a while to think of lower aspects as just part of our human consciousness because it's just who we are. People we know are people we know. Some people we like, some people we don't like, but we kind of stay in these situations. We don't really move a lot, and that's one of the biggest things about human. They don't move a lot. When but and you mentioned how things change, and the one thing about life is it always changes, but in human consciousness it really doesn't change that much. You can leave people a couple years, check back in there, and doing the same thing they were always doing. But we did that too. Just when you start going through ascension, you change a lot faster. Things change over a lot quicker. I used to think that if it was highest in line, it was going to stay, but that turned out to not be true. It was highest line then, but now it's not. Now it shifts. There's no stability in that. What was okay was aligned is now not aligned. So now I got to go and the next thing wants to come in. So now this has got to go, and it's that constant um turning over. It's that constant turning over of the realities, and when we're starting to look at soul aspects, and when you start to feel those soul aspects, and I get all mine at least the last few years, probably the last 5 years. That's the one thing I will still get in my dream state are aspects. The one aspect, whatever it's going to be for that year, I'll get it. I'll meet that aspect in my dream, that soul aspect. I'll meet him in my dream state for that. The next, usually it might not be a linear year, but I know from how my cadence of it goes that I might see them in February, and that's when I kind of know that I'll be integrating in that aspect. So whatever that aspect is, and whatever in my life that is not aligned with the frequency of that aspect has to go or has to be realigned into the frequency of that aspect. And for the most part, when we're talking about human consciousness, people who still live from that is just not the easiest thing for people to understand, and be able to shift into that. I can remember people talking about dating a person, right? And I'm going to say, if you can't remember your dreams, just ask to remember them. I do see that in the comments, and I will tell you that's all you got to do. Ask to remember them. Give yourself permission to remember them, and you'll be surprised how far you can go. But I remember people saying, I would date a person and then, I'd get, I'd be in a different relationship, and now this person is in a new relationship and they're so nice and they're so this and they're so that. It's like, how is that? How they're like a totally different person and it's been like 3 days or 3 weeks or whatever, because they're shining a different aspect. They're showing them a different soul aspect. Can they hold that aspect? Chances are, if it's only been a small amount of time, they can't hold it. They can hit it for a little while, but it's not their home frequency. Their home frequency is still their human consciousness. Doesn't mean you can't get someone to flash a different aspect of us. And a lot of times that would confuse me for a while, because I would see it so many different aspects of the person. But until you really spend time with them, you really don't understand least I didn't understand that. Yeah, but that's just an aspect of them. That's just what they want me to see. But they can't hold that. When shit hits the fan or things get rocky, they're going to revert back to their home frequency. And if you're dealing with someone who still lives from a human consciousness, that's a human frequency. That's the aspects you're playing, and all the aspects Marissa talked about in the beginning and more, but those are the ones she hit on. Those are the ones you're playing in. Just because you're seeing a different side to them for a little while doesn't mean they're completely a changed, ascended person. Even though it can be confusing on how all of a sudden these people are acting totally different. It's almost like putting your best foot forward. People call it showing your A game. You're showing that A aspect, but we kind of learn after a while that when we start meeting people, if their A aspect is like a Z and an F and D, we didn't want to get to the next. We don't want to get into when they're under stress because it's going to get downhill after that. we're already in the muck of the aspects, and you're not even getting the highest aspect they can muster at the moment. When it gets rough down the road, how you're going to fall a long way, because that's just how that's going to go. I do see another. Let me see what Corey said about dreams. I used to write dreams journals and I'd date them and title them. And that was kind of a fun thing to do for the dreaming, because I am big into the dreaming and tapping in. It's just a huge, if people do, Robert Moss has a lot of great books on dreaming. It feels a little antiquated to me now, but back then it was huge. So people want to start tackling that aspect because I do think that is the first place we really start to open up beyond our human aspects is dreaming. And if you don't open up there, you can't open up anywhere else. It's not possible. You have to start ascending in the dream state first. That's why people sleep a lot. You have to start doing that. You start to understand more. You start to understand that how humans define things. I mean, you start to look at, is it the opposite? Like recently had someone I knew got a cataract removed, and they're like, oh, it's grew on the eye, and then they got the cataract off. No, I can see so much clearly. And then I'm like, no, I think it's the opposite. I think it was always there. It's starting to break apart where somebody can see it, and now it looks like it just came there. But what if it was always there? And all of a sudden it's just breaking up, and now I can remove it, and you see brighter. So it always is it kind of can show you different realities, different twist on things, how things are not what our human mind is trained, how it's been trained to see. But that trips us up a lot in the beginning because you've been trained for so long. Your DNA is so embedded in staying together, staying in groups. You don't want to get picked up by the wildebeest. You got to stay together. You can't separate off into a different pod somewhere else. You got to just ingrain right in. It was that movie, The Cruise, when they had the big sleep pile. Everyone has to stay together. We don't want anyone to get ahead and get eaten. Everyone stay together. So we're kind of trained to do that. And in essentially, we have to start breaking off because your together is with your other aspects. It's not with your people anymore. You can't stay with your people, and you can't still connect with the external and then go inside and connect with the internal. You don't have that much energy. I'll guarantee you don't. Nobody does. You have to kind of make that decision. And sometimes your universe, when it's your time, makes it for you. And all these people just go away. Maybe they go on a trip. Maybe they transfer. They go to a different state, whatever. Either you take care of it or your universe cleans it up for you. But it will get taken care of one way or the other. The question is, do you want to do it? Or sometimes we don't realize we have to do it. In the beginning, there's a lot of things that just kind of, if you look back, you see the signs. I think now I see stuff coming a long ways away because I just notice the signs more. You can see through the field. You can read the field and see these things are winding down years before they wind down. The same signs were there in our human consciousness. We just did not have the vision to see that. We didn't have the vision to recognize that. We did not have the frequency to read the field, to really understand that, yeah, all the same signs were there. We're not all of a sudden in this place that is so different. We're viewing it through a different lens, so we can see it better. We can see it clearer as to what we're doing, what other people are doing, how everything kind of ties back together. So I'll kick it back to you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Just loving your comments. Welcome. Thank you for being here with us. And I love it, Annette. when I'm with you and we do these talks, it makes me so happy because I never miss the important stuff that I didn't write down. Like, I'm meditating before we get together to try to like really bring this in a grounded way. And you hit on it about aspects of others and the confusion. So some of the words that I had that I was excited to talk about and I didn't write them down and you reminded me. There's a difference between, so I'm going to throw some words out there, everybody. Deception, manipulation. Now, there's a difference when that's happening intentionally versus unintentionally. When a person is intentionally, being manipulative by not letting you see all of them or doing something like mirroring, or they're not aware of what they're doing because this is part of their imprinting and it's part of their like base survival programs of how they survive perhaps a traumatic or gnarly environment or in response in reactivity to society in order to get to this point because everyone who's here at this point doesn't matter where you are or where you think you are on the journey, we're all here. It's go time, it's game time, we are at master levels. It's awesome. And so it's just important. And when you were talking about all those pieces, I was like, oh my gosh, we got to bring this in, the twin flame stuff, and like feeling like you're seeing fragments of people, but we're not getting the whole picture. And so this is where our discernment and our sovereign tuning in and navigating, feeling through our hearts to feel what's real because now I'm going to go two ways with this. People can tell us what we want to hear, and they can do it intentionally, and they can do it also unintentionally, meaning that they actually believe that and that's actually their intention, but are they capable of it right now? And so this is where you see a lot of the like disillusionment, in love and in partnerships and any kind of relationship. I'm going to say love, whether it's like platonic, business, partnership, friendship, romance, any of it. This skill set will assist everybody to save so much time and energy. And of course, we have to learn what we have to learn. But when you start to observe patterns, you start to realize, like, oh, wow, I've got to exercise a deeper investigative kind of like one of my teachers would call it a God probe, which I thought is such a great image. Like, it's God probe coming out, like, reading it all, like to really know, like, what's true, is this appealing to an aspect of me that's, an ego aspect that's actually not really for my greatest good right now or whatever. So, twin flames, unintentional deception, mirroring, manipulation. Feel the energy, not the words you want to hear. Feel the energy, not the words you want to hear, because it's going to give you the information. Like, let's say you're like, yeah, I do want to learn through a partner. I've never had a real, partner that was really there to do this ascension process with me. I'm being told, even though maybe it scares me, maybe I'm in resistance, that a partnership is what will enable me to clear more stuff I can't do on my own now. I went from being alone, now it's time to partner. And you want to have the aligned partner, right? And so you want to bring your higher aspects forth to pull that in and not waste your time with someone who's actually, appearing to or believes they are on the same trajectory and they're actually not. So you need to be able to read deeper, deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper levels of like, what is the energy really here? How deep is this energy for this person? And I know we're talking about judgment today, but this isn't with any judgment. This is the perception of reading, discerning, reading the energy, feeling what is the level of the frequency differential here. It's a phrasing I really like to use when we talk about relationships, because even our closest people, we do have to, come together and pull apart for sometimes for years. We got to go off, do our journey. The love is still there. We're still soul family. We'll come back into each other's lives again, when we cross paths again, kind of thing. And it's really listening to the energy and allowing the energy to guide you, following the energy, letting it transform the situation, evolve everything about it, and not get fixated. And so this is another aspect, like mastery aspect of like when we're starting to see like, oh my gosh, everything's a flow, and I'm either hindering it or resisting it or trying to hold on to it, and control it. Like there's always just deeper layers of just let go. Just let go, surrender and surrender. And we're going to be seeing these themes even more deeply now in this next phase that we're in for decades. We're in it now and it's going to continue to unfold here. And so I want to thank you so much, Annette, for taking us there, because this is all so important for people. These are like master classes, our talks. So thank you. And when we talk about the next level of this consciousness, I want to talk about like the masters of the Far East, or you could think about like the Jedi, like these amazing masters of wisdom. There's a lot of self-discipline, and it's this I am presence. The presence is becoming more simplified and also more of an observer, a witness consciousness. And if you haven't already really connected with this within yourself, I want to invite everyone to consider who their inner being is, because we've all had this aspect with us, our soul aspect inside of us since we were little. And then over time, it gets harder to hear the guidance or hear the voice or whatever, or trust it. But it's like, who is your inner being and what are they saying? Because we have this aspect of our higher self soul that's been with us this whole time from the get-go and would try to say like, oh, don't touch that stove, it's hot, or make sure you look that way before you cross the street, like almost like a guardian angel. And when we're in different human aspects it feels separated, we start to realize, oh my gosh, this is a part of me, and it's also like my best friend, for me to defer back to until we are one, until we are unified as one. And so the next, as we're stair stepping here with aspects and talking about these pieces, then we go from soul aspect to even more expansion, and you could say like 5D plus now, of the neutral observer or the witness consciousness, which is a lot less emotional. So there's a lot less judgment now, but you're still going to see it trickle in different ways. Then you start meeting judgment in different ways through resistance or a spiritual bypassing, or thinking you're done because you've reached this ascended state, and a sage kind of, and not as emotional and feeling more detached and free, and you feel amazing. But then tomorrow you wake up and you're like, oh my god, somehow I plummeted back into hell. So we have to get back in and walk back in to that space within again, by clearing again, by realigning, because there's this constant ping pong up and down happening of reaching these exalted states inside, but we can only hold them for so long, and then that light goes whoo, and we could tunnel down even more deeply into level one, we'll just say, just to try to quantify the information, which is deeper aspects of the human that we are continuing to deprogram from, and to purify our intentions and our motivations, and yeah, our integrity as well. So I will pass it over. It's unity, like the initial entrances into what unity consciousness means, where we go more towards the we. All of a sudden, we're taking into consideration, in addition to our journey, like how we are affecting others by everything that we are doing, thinking, putting out there, and so on. So yeah, this just to continue with that kind of stair stepping ascension kind of metaphor. But I'll pass it to you, Annette.
Well, I like how you brought up the twin flames. We'll have to do a whole thing on that. At some point we'll have to do a whole thing on that. That's a whole different can of worms. That's a whole different can of worms that gets opened. Even though, like you said, technically everyone's a twin. But it's funny when I use that wording, a lot of people kind of tune it out. People don't like the word. But if you talk about relationships, everyone's like, "Oh, what?" It reminds me of is an old joke about um, someone was going to go on a medication, and the doctors were reading off all this stuff to the lady about what could happen. Like you could grow a third nipple, all this stuff, and then the woman wasn't paying any attention, and then the doctor's like, "Oh, you could gain weight," and she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, what did you say? Did you say I could gain weight?" Well, your arm could fall off, but don't worry about that. You can put on weight. What? And you just got my attention. It's kind of the same thing. When you talk about romantic relationships, and the minute you say that, everyone's like, what? What'd you say? I don't want to hear the whole twin thing because that might be too woo-woo, but relationships in general. And there are some people who really resonate with the twin flame word, even though technically, like you said, everyone is. I tend to, when I talk about them, I go more to the romantic ones because those are normally the ones that get a little deeper, the ones that have the sexual relationships, those are the ones that normally kind of get us on a different in a different space. So I always think it's an interesting what words, and the twin flame has been beaten to death. That word has been beaten to death. That whole runner chaser bullshit has been beaten to death. To where you can bring up the word and people to start reciting it, because that in itself is a big, matrix, a big cluster of everything that goes into that. And so it's kind of interesting to me the different the different, even though the wording now has gotten kind of bastardized, the way people describe things, the way people even talk about ascension now. Some people, we used to hear New Earth all the time. Now nobody really says it. I mean, I very rarely hear anybody really even describe it as that anymore, because it just, the words get so just just kind of milled down, I guess, and then there are just new words kind of pop in to kind of take their place in different frequencies. You get just a new understanding of it. But I do think it's interesting when we start to talk about, like, for me, none of my aspects did I even start to recognize them to probably I was 60, 70, 80, where I understood it. That doesn't mean, like you said, they're not there at 5D, but I still think I had just kind of one. I just had my soul and my human, the whole angel devil thing, if you want to go that route, just for a picture, just for a word picture. And it took me a while to realize I had more than that. I mean, you hear people talk about it. We've both been in many talks. People talk about it, but until you're in it, you don't really understand. And then I would started to see different ones, and in my dream state, first. That's usually where I get them. I haven't got one for a while, but usually where I get them. You start to kind of understand that there's many facets of that, of your soul, and there's many aspects of that. You have a Christ aspect, you have a Archangel Michael aspect. There's a lot of different ones. There's just two. You have the God, people call it the God particle, some people might even call it a God aspect. You have a lot of different parts of that. But then when you get to the galactic, that to me is the detached aspects. Those are the ones that I actually like, those a little bit better, because I've done so much of the soul stuff that when I got to the galactic stuff, I found that because it had no, I don't want to say it has no soul, but in a way, it does have a human, it doesn't really care. It just wants to get to the point. And I'm still kind of now, I still into just get to the point. What do you want? I hate when someone texts me this whole thing about 100 different, what are you trying to say? Are you trying to say this? Just say that, and I don't need all the stuff around that. Just what are you trying to say? We'll get to the point. Just what is the point of what you're trying to say, and let's move on from there. But when you get to those aspects, it's a great way when you start to play with your galactic aspects and call in your galactic aspects. And I do feel men more easily connect with galactic aspects. I've always felt like they are more embody those a little bit easier. They're wired a little differently. And that detachment that goes with those aspects or more easily integrated. Whereas as when you start with just the female DNA, I feel like we have a little bit harder time with the detaching of things because we're not supposed to. We're supposed to carry everything with us in a sense. So whereas the men can kind of shut it off. Compartmentalizing it is what a human would say, but it's a different frequency of compartmentalizing it. You just start to shut it off in a sense. It doesn't matter. You start to cut the cords to all this stuff because you start to see that in whether it's the galactic intelligence, the grander vision the galactic aspects give you, it just tunnels you into the humanness of it all and how it really doesn't matter. And it can be, I was kind of scared of my galactic aspects. I can remember getting a god, what looked like some kind of god's head, a replica, and I was afraid of that thing. And I called her Monica, and I put her on my thing, and I would just stare at Monica, and I was like, Monica is scary. I think she was made out of amethyst, and she was so scary. She was like a skull, but had the big eyes, and anytime I tried to do a stream with Monica, everything would go wild. Like you couldn't hear me. Everything would go. I think I gave Monica away to somebody who's going into their big galactic phase. I gave Monica away. And I don't know where Monica is now. I'm assuming I told her to give Monica away again when she found someone to take Monica. But yeah, I have a couple streams with Monica, and it was just because it's so unhuman. A lot of people like the Palladians a little bit better because they look more human. And for me, it's also it goes into a very asexual time too. I think when you start getting into the galactic aspects, because they don't have a gender, so you don't really have those human things. You're more into the in galactic intelligence, the galactic um, scientific understanding, the grander understanding of the universe, why we're here. And I always think it's funny when I listen to a lot of the UFO stuff, and it's been a lot of that stuff lately. It kind of morphed, and they were having congressional hearings on it, and it was just kind of interesting to watch it activate so many people and getting into it. Because that's the purpose of it. The purpose is to activate everyone and get everyone kind of talking about it and making it more mainstream. They don't call it. It's not even UFOs. It's now what I can't think of what it's called. Unidentified flying. It's not UFO. It's
A
UAP.
U
That's what it is. UAP.
UAP.
That's what they call it now. UAP, not UFO. UFO. No, it's a UAP. Um, and it's just kind of interesting to see a lot of that stuff surface. And I used to listen to these two dudes would do a podcast on it, and they would be like, "What if the aliens show up?" And I'm like, "Oh, we're so already here. You're already there. You don't even realize it, but you will soon enough. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You realize it's just part of you. But it is a huge part of you. And even I know I talked about the Y files. We've talked about listening to some of those. They go into different galactic races and how different creation methods of how this world even got here and simulation theory and those types of things. But to me, the galactic aspects go beyond the judgment, that they just really cut to everything. And it becomes a just an escape. I think when I got to my galactic aspects, either I didn't like the way they looked, it was a little frightening. I enjoyed those years more than when I was working through a soul aspect. And I did soul first, and then I went to galactic. And I kind of feel like I kind of now dip in and out of both. I don't know. Some people think they go one or the other. I definitely spent a lot more years in the beginning into soul aspects, and then when I got started my galactic aspects, um, which came to me in a dream. But I always kind of just saw them all as like one being in a sense. I didn't see like a lot of the different races. I mean, I've done a little research on them because all my cats are different galactic races. They're all rooted in a different galactic race. So I dream about them before I would get them. We talk more about pets. I dream about them before I get them. I know what galactic race they had started from and what they wanted to be called and all that kind of stuff before they kind of popped in. And I always knew. And I have one cat that when she sleeps next to my head, I know I'm in a very galactic phase, and she's assisting me with that. And if she sleeps in my feet, or if she sleeps in a different room, I know I'm just in a different phase. And she's kind of a a trigger, not really trigger, but a guide for that, I guess, in a sense. But I'm going to kick it back to you. I don't know how you feel. I always felt you were really galactic. You don't seem to think you are, which is up to you. But I always felt like you were more than me because I was not that much. So to me, maybe that's why, because you were more galactic than I was. So anytime I listen to you talk on some of the groups we've been in over the years, I was like, oh, there's Marissa. She's so galactic. And then when I was hearing you, you're like, oh, I really don't see myself like that. I'm like, oh boy, I do, but it's because I'm really not, I guess, or I wasn't for a long time. But to me, they were a break. Galactic aspects were a break when you really needed to get to the quick of it. Now they scared other people, and I kind of understand that now because it's not like the face was scary, but the tone, I don't know if it's curt, but the directness of it put people off. Human consciousness got very put off by that. They would be afraid to ask me a question because they didn't know how to phrase it, and they would be that they tiptoed around me a lot during those embodiments because we do get very direct about it. Like, what is it? Just break it down for me. You realize how much humans we talk so much, but we don't say anything and we don't get to anything. It's just really everyone's bitching about all their stuff, and you're not really getting to the point of what you actually want. Or what do you want me to do? Or what is the purpose of the conversation? Do you want to meet up? Do you want to come over? What do you want to do? Let's get to the heat, whatever it is. So I'm going to let you go with that for a while.
Oh, this is great. Thank you. I've had some amazing belly laughs just with all of this, and I love where you're going here with all the galactic. And it's an interesting reflection, and thank you for your reflection, that you've always seen me as that, because I'm seeing that it was so second nature with how I grew up that I didn't really realize, you know? And so sometimes you go through these phases where you are more galactic as a child and stuff, and then so I'll share some of I'll share some stuff I have never shared, on online like this, which is definitely knowing I was like an alien and observing everyone, being little and just being like, "Dang, these people are, like, weird, like, they're really toxic, they're really upset, like, they're not really enjoying their experience, like, wow, why?" Um, to having, if you wanna say I don't like labels, but just to try to convey concepts, contactee. So, at 5 years old, all of a sudden waking up to marks on my body, and my sister had the same marks on a different part of her body, and we went to the pediatrician. My mom was always really like, because I had so much like weird autoimmune illness and like needing hypoallergenic fucking products and like sensitive to everything. She was more aware, like, okay, you've got health needs or whatever. And so we went to the pediatrician and he looked at my arm and he was like, "Oh, well, that's your alien stamp from being abducted." And I remember, I'm presenting as a 5-year-old in a 5-year-old age body and stuff, but inside I was actually really pissed at him because I was like, "Dude, that's not a joke. Like, you're laughing and you think this is funny, you know? And I don't think that's very fucking funny." So there's these weird things where you're like not really your age, but then you are, and then there's a human part of you that's your age. And talk about, confusing as hell. So yeah, I guess I have been more galactic more naturally. And then what shifted for me was leaving Hawaii and coming to the mainland, and coming to California, and talk about a culture shock. um Much more materialism and labels of clothes and like stuff that was so foreign to me. It was just very, very strange. And then trying to fit in, and then going through puberty and a lot of the human. So I really went human, I would say, puberty into young adulthood until I had my daughter, because I was getting ready to leave. I was like, fuck this place. No one has their hearts open. Everyone is like, and it wasn't like a judgment thing, it was just kind of feeling like, why would I come into a hell realm where everyone's heart is shut down and they're not feeling and they don't see each other, they don't really even see, like, what's here, like, how amazing the reality is, and the gift that it is to be here, like, why the fuck would I come here? So my daughter came, thank you, to my daughter, to anchor me here, to keep fulfilling my promise, and that's something that we should discuss here is, um, with this whole segment of this show and like everything we're talking about is what we're coming to more deeply every day is like, why did we come here? Like, truly, like, why did we come here? And it was to learn, and it was to serve the collectives through our own integration and healing and holding journey, and then to open up into higher and higher aspects of unity consciousness. And there's a lot of different words to describe the different kind of flavors, if you will, of these different vibrational frequencies of consciousness, like the Christed masters, the Magdalene, the galactics, and even in galactics. So where I was going with this was, there's like human galactics and like, the human matrix stories. So think about like the X-Files, or ET, movies, pop culture, where we were programmed to fear, to fear the galactics, right? And to therefore suppress that we are galactics as well. And just to kind of like, collapse time here. Just the other day, I saw an article where they're finally coming out with some disclosure on how our DNA, I think I want to say they said a couple 100 million years ago and then 300,000 years ago, that they're tracking our DNA, and scientists are able to now see that we had some kind of visitation from advanced civilizations that up leveled us. Jumpstart. I thought that was really interesting that they actually opened the timelines going back several million, because they usually won't do that for human consciousness and human evolution and human history. So, I mean, everything is up for review and edit right now. It's very exciting. But then to go to, 300,000 years ago. So, what I would like to share is, for anyone out there who has ever experienced, and again, I'm going to use labels to just talk about experiences that we have, that eventually we transcend them, targeted individuals. So experiences with so-called negative, extraterrestrials or negative whatever, and like weird experiences, and you will transcend those too. the big thing is, no matter where we are in the game, is to take our power back and to balance out the aspects and to realize that, as divine beings here, of many lineages and all kinds of, just so much information, and that we are made of everything in the unified field, we wouldn't come here for an overtly negative experience. So even our interpretation, depending on your life and how often you came in with galactic stuff starting really early, if it seemed to be scary or malicious or whatever, that will transform too, the more you see and know yourself, the more you expand the love that you are. You take your power back also, from a lot of these experiences. So I've always wanted to talk about that, and it probably should be its own video about feeling like and having a belief system for a few years of being a targeted individual. But this plagues a lot of people in their awakening journey, and they're stuck there for a long time or sometimes forever, which is unfortunate. And so Annette touched on this of like, I can't remember the words that you used, but at the end of the day, with all of this, is to keep reaching higher, to keep expanding and opening and letting things become more. Like nothing is inherently good or bad, like keep allowing, what is this about, what am I here to see, and just know that we did come here for a pretty amazing, divine, superhero comic book, sci-fi fantasy novel, like all over the board, kind of experience. um and that we're going to have for a long time, we're going to have judgments at every step of the way, and they're going to morph of how those forms are, and then eventually we're going to come to such deeper layers of the subconscious that then we realize that we're in the mirror verse, and the people around us, the souls around us, are assisting us to see where we can't see on our own. So this is where some of the relationships could come in, or even clients, even parasocial relationships and social media. You start to realize how literally everything is mirroring something for you to see, to go more deeply and to integrate and to love or to let go or evolve it, whatever, which is really exciting. And I will pass it back to you because I feel like I've been talking for a long time. I'm losing my concept of time.
I am too. And I laughed when he said it was an alien stamp because I'm like, dude, he just said that right up. Like he just gave the secret away. Like, ah, ah, ah. That was so
I don't know
funny.
if
It's
you
your
can say
alien
it.
stamp from being abducted. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Your
Yeah,
mom
I
would have
don't
been
know if
like,
you
my
can
mom
say
would
it.
have been like, well, we're gonna find a new doctor. Get your stuff.
Yeah. So it's
My mom
three.
would have got me out of there so fast. They'd have been like, what? We're out of here. Get your stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that's funny. That made me laugh. Because I'm like, dude, he just said, it's funny because unconsciously he wanted to tell you it's okay. It's okay. Wink, wink. It's okay. It's okay. We know. Um, it's funny when you mentioned a couple things. I didn't bring my piece of paper. I was gonna write some of that stuff down, but I just talked about the Wi-Fi's. I'm gonna mention it again because he does a lot of videos on the jump between what we knew and all of a sudden now we know all this so much more stuff, and the amount of time it took to learn how to do fire to now having electric cars, it doesn't make any sense. And I can't remember what even the galactic race they call them, that supposedly, what was like the grandfather to, whether you want to say it's a simulation or whether you want to say that's what started the simulation. I cannot remember, but he would go over how all the floods kind of reset and then they start again, and they would send someone down to kind of give you more knowledge. Let's redo it again. Let's redo it again. And I've dreamed a lot about floods and how someone came down and, we're going to get rid of all the humans. We're going to keep some of the animal species, and we're going to just reset the whole thing all over again. So the Y-Files is really fun. Sometimes he tries to debunk it. Sometimes he can't. If you have someone very linear and you want to open up the concepts to somebody, it's a fun way to open up the concepts. But he goes through a lot of that, just how much. And even if you even go to something really funny, because I used to believe, this is going to sound even funny, but I used to believe we went to the moon. I really believe that. And I thought people who are saying that's a conspiracy, we never went to the moon. That's just ridiculous. Of course we went to the moon. But then when you start to really think about it, and when you look at the technology we had in that timeline, and now we can't go to the moon. Now, and when you ask NASA, they say we forgot, we lost the technology, we can't find it. What? That doesn't make so that it just racks your brain. You're like, so we never went, did we? Because if you look at some of that video, it does kind of look like Scotch tape. Um, so it is just hysterical to me when because I used to think when in my human consciousness I was like, well, that, of course we did. That's ridiculous. But now looking at it from a different space, I'm like, I don't know if we did anymore, and that doesn't make a lot of sense. And he goes farther. There's something on the moon. You know, is the moon hollow? Is the moon a spaceship? The moon doesn't make a lot of sense. The way the moon is explained, it shouldn't work that way. You know, so there's a lot of kind of stuff around the moon, but I just kind of thought that was funny because he's like, all of a sudden we can't go anywhere. And I'm like, right? That doesn't make any sense. Now we have to go through all these. We didn't have to do that in 1960, what, 1969? We got there fine. Now we can't get there because we lost the technology. We're not, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But there's so many things that even a lot of the discoveries, you know, the benzene ring was discovered in the dream state. A lot of great music came to people in the dream state when they were open to different aspects of them coming through. You know, a lot of the biggest scientific discoveries were, I think they call them the young and dryas. I think that's what he calls them on that channel about who's programmed a lot of the DNA. That I think it's the young and dryas. I could be wrong on that, but I think that's the angle he goes. So it might be a big activation for people when they hear that. It might not be. You know, you're gonna have to listen to you can listen to some different stuff. And like I said, people who aren't into anything, it can open people up that are really closed off about it, right?
Who is
Because he
that
comes
again?
at it a kind of a different way.
Could you say the person's name again? Who is that again? That has
Young
this?
and Dry, I think it was the Young and Dryas was the galactic race that they're saying kept resetting us. That kept resetting. I think he calls them the Young and Dryas, or maybe that's the age, but I think that's more of the people. When you go through the Egyptian timelines, all the timelines kind of would end in the same kind of place. And then everyone, all of a sudden, there's a big bump in what we knew. There's another big bump in what we knew. And if you just think about, if I just think about the 1980s and how I grew up, and what all these kids have now, it's not that long ago to be where we are now. It's crazy. If you look from the 70s to now, you know, if you look at, we had horse and buggies, you know, and now all of a sudden it doesn't really make a lot of linear sense. And whether you want to say, okay, we were reprogrammed, or are we just unlocking more of the DNA now? You can take it a lot of different ways. You know, he's going to explain it one way. He's going to try to explain it in a scientific way because that YouTube channel goes that way. Or you could look at it from a consciousness way and say, okay, now our consciousness is just starting to bleed over. We're more open to unlocking all this stuff that's in our DNA. We don't need someone to program it. It's already there. Or it wasn't programmed, now we're just unlocking it. You know, it's so much just interesting topics around it, and just so much even thinking when you think about, you know, you hear a lot about the alien abductions, and I used to think, well, okay, if I break that down into their galactic aspects, or they're seeing an aspect of them. But it's the same way that when we would see aspects of our human people that were in our life from a soul perspective, and we're like, how are you people there? You know, there's still an aspect of us, but we don't really know which one. And it's kind of the same thing with the galactics when people would see different, you know, alien forms or whatever. It's just an aspect of them. It's just one that they can be heavily resisting, and a lot of it sparks a lot of fear in people. You know, like you said, we have been trained to be very fearful. Very few alien movies end well. Most of them end with them trying to take over the world. You know, they don't normally end in kumbaya. But then when you think about human consciousness, and if you even take it to this level, where when you think about where we used to be and how we used to feel and how we used to operate as a human consciousness, and then think at how when you get to certain ascended states, all of a sudden you feel like you're so much more than that state. And then it's like, that must be how the galactics look at us. Like, oh, they're like toddlers. Look at them running around. Look at them running around thinking they're doing something. You know, they're like toddlers. But that's kind of how we start to look at humans after a while. They're like toddlers. And when I go through the transition, my ascension, and then I start to look at people ascending through death, and you start, if you're around older people, a lot of people either they're taking care of their parents. I think that's a lot of reasons why a lot of us get to do that during part of the journey, because you're starting to see the parallels between ascension, conscious ascension, and ascension, when they're, how it very much parallels. It comes through in a different way, but they start shedding their memories, they start sleeping a lot, they start doing a lot of the stuff we do, but they're doing it to transition and eventually come back in a different body and ascend in that body. But you can see so many different, um one, they're mirroring different aspects of stuff we're going through, but we're going through it like in more of an agreed upon conscious journey, a predetermined conscious journey, and they're not having that, but they're still going to have the same things as their body starts to pull away, whether it's maybe 10 years before they actually leave. But if you're going through that, and like I said, I know a lot of people end up back with with parents, or they're taking care of older people, or maybe they do it for a job. I had one of my Reiki teachers worked in a hospice, and she said she would rather be with someone when they took their last breath than work in pediatrics when a baby took their first. But she wanted to be with someone at the end, because that's not where a lot of people want to be. They don't want to see that. They don't want to see the end. Um, and a lot of us have a fear of that. I know I had to kind of really look in that for me and go, wow, yeah, I don't know if I want to see that. Seeing the end of that, of the end of someone's physical journey. Um, but it is just different aspects of us, and we start to parallel these journeys and start to see, well, a lot of the ascension stuff we go through, people get older, they go through that. We're just kind of trained to think it's just old age. But it's their journey. It's the same thing we're doing. It's just they're doing it unconsciously. Their body's just starting it. It's starting that because it has to be at a certain frequency to go. It has to be at a certain frequency. They have to clear certain things to go, to be able to pull away and go. That's why you have that moment right before, when people would see people right before they would pass. They go, they look great. I went to visit them, they look great, never looked better, because there's so much of their soul had come in, and their color was beautiful, and then the next day they're gone because so much of them had come in at one time. So I just kind of want to throw that in, because I know for me, I'm noticing a lot of that parallel between different parts of my ascension journey and different stages of someone, aging, and whether they're in their 80s or their 90s or whatever, going through, whether they're having to, go into a home and have all their stuff sold, they're having to reconcile having all that stuff go away, the detachment of all that physical stuff, so we just go through it in a different frequency. And when you start to look at different parts of people's journeys, you can say it's a different aspect of you. They're going through it in a different frequency. And if you were in that frequency, you'd be going through it a very similar way. You'd have a similar understanding. You'd have a similar, because you'd only be able to tap into the knowledge of that frequency. And that's all you got. You can't all of a sudden, it's always like if you had one person, you put them in a different situation, all of a sudden you expect them to be something different. They're not going to be. They're still the same. They only have the knowledge they have at the frequency they have. They haven't unlocked anything else. That's that's all that is. It's just bringing all this stuff up. That you can only unlock what you can unlock. But you might look at it a totally different way, and all of a sudden you don't feel sorry for what people are going through. You understand. We kind of, just to bring it back to judgment, and I'm going to kick it back to you to close this out. Um, when you start doing that and looking at, we kind of would judge that. We don't want people to have to go through that. We don't want people to have to suffer. We don't want any of that stuff to happen at the end for people. But when we're going through ascension, we go through that. But because we go through it in a different frequency, it's different. So no matter what you're going through, and then you have to be compassionate. We can take the judgment to compassion. And, it's like, just because someone's going through it and you can see through it, doesn't mean you don't have compassion for the people going through it, because to them, in that frequency, they are suffering. And sometimes we can tend to forget that, especially when we're in our galactic phase, and we just can't with people. We just don't have the bandwidth, really. Because the galactic aspects, we just focus on other things. It's more unlocking that intelligence. It's unlocking how the DNA was programmed. It's unlocking all of that type of stuff. So we don't have the bandwidth to tap into the other stuff until you get to certain parts of your journey where I think you're doing both aspects at the same time. You're doing soul aspects, you're doing galactic aspects. So, all right, I'm gonna sign off on that, and I'm gonna let you close this out because we're getting close. And I will not be here for two of the next weeks. I won't be here because I'm gonna take next week off, and the next week I have company, and I'll be back, I think, on the 24th. So, just so people don't think I abandoned. And I think Marissa's gonna have some. She's gonna have special guests. So okay, I'm gonna put it back to you for the close, Marissa.
Thank you, Annette, so much for all of that. It's so great. And we have some great questions here in the chat. So I want to address, because thank you so much for this wonderful question. We have Mystic asking about the mirroring in relationships. And if you have anything on this too, Annette, please, But this person is asking about mirroring in relationships, and we're all triggering each other, awakening aspects in each other. Any advice on how we can stay centered through this? It's a fabulous question because it's very real, and we start to become acutely aware that it's happening, and it's been happening most of our lives, but now it's like constant. So to stay centered, the first piece of advice that I would share based on my own experience is to start each day as best you can in your center and in your heart and in your love and with your universe, and remembering to take the big picture here. Okay, I'm here to have this mystical, magical, sometimes really, really challenging experience. And everyone here, everything here is for me. Everyone here, everything here is for me. And it's just starting to come into that like love and the receivership. The receivership is a big code. It keeps opening up. Oh my gosh, so much. And receiving your experience, receiving your reality, receiving that this is all an expedited process now for you to accelerate as much as you want. Like it, and the energy is going to meet you as comfortable as you are with it. As in as least amount of resistance as possible. Because when we're not coming from the ego aspect, right? Meaning we're not taking it personal. We're seeing it from a bigger and expanded perspective where everything, everyone that happens, that comes in, the great stuff, the pleasurable stuff, the awful, painful stuff, it's all a teacher. It's all a mastery teaching. It's all to assist us to expand and to come into even more of an expanded sense of awareness where it's depersonalized, because we're gathering the wisdom of experience and being shown deeper aspects of ourself. When we see, this is a thing that came through that I love to say this, when we can see, we are free. We are free to choose what's true, right? We are free to choose who we be then, right? Because now you're being given options like, oh, am I this? And I'm going to respond this way, or am I going to respond this way? Or is that their stuff that they're helping me to see? It becomes this really interesting, it's quantum entanglement where it's all one. This person may be in a particular phase of development or challenge, and they're not doing their self-care enough, and then they're learning how to not project that onto you or to demand too much of you, but you have to meet that energy by saying, I'm not available for that, or giving them some tips to handle and learn how to master their energy on their own, and then you walk away. Or it's a parent or a person that isn't on the journey of consciousness, and you can't say any of those things to them, but you are there perhaps to hold the space only. Maybe there's not much to say to them, but to hold that loving, compassionate witness space for them. So you're in your inner being for you first every morning, start the day, end the day with it too at night, and you bring that presence forth with others, and you appreciate what they are bringing. Everyone here, everything that happens, every trigger, it's an activation. It's actually a divine gift from God's source universe for you to evolve, for you to see and feel and be more free than ever before. Because piece by piece, thread by thread, we're taking our power back. We're taking our love back, and we're becoming love instead of anger, love instead of fear. This loving ancient presence that doesn't take anything personal because it understands exactly where the other is coming from, because we were there once too, right? So there's like a lot of layers of the mirrorverse, but I hope that that can assist. The best is to just do your best to start every day in your center and honor, and just start to get into the mindset that everything is for you. Everything is a gift. And if you can just start with that, it really assists in the intense, more intense and challenging, like, stuff that really throws you off center, because it's constantly a test to assist us so that we can strengthen our connection and strengthen all of this activation and hold that light quotient even more, So yeah, just know that kind of the whack-a-mole, I call it the whack-a-mole, where you have these cycles where it's like, okay, oh, that was really tough. Oh, I'm back now. Bing again. You're like, and it's just like, oh my gosh, it's nonstop. And another way I'll call that is like a G force. Like, if you've ever seen that movie, I think it's called Spaceman or Rocket Man, with that one comedian, and they put him in the machine to do the G force to practice to go into space, and his whole face is flying back, like his cheeks are flying back. It's hysterical, right? So that kind of G force, like if you can imagine that, that's actually what happens, that's what's happening to us in this accelerated energy, as we are hurtling at quite a velocity, a light velocity through time space, but we appear to be moving still. So yeah, hopefully some of this can help you have fun and just continue to expand it. And then I'll give it back to you, and then we'll wrap up.
I think you hit on it. And another way to say it is just step away from the mirror. Once you realize you're mirroring each other, that's massive because you get to a frequency where you're doing that. People do that all the time and don't realize that that's what they're doing. And if someone calls it out, and then you're like, oh yeah, that is what we're doing. But then a lot of people just keep doing it. Once you stepping away from the mirror means you stop doing it. What am I mirroring? Am I mirroring? We're procrastinating. We're arguing over this. We're fighting over this. What am I mirroring back? And then why am I doing that? What is inside of me that's getting me to go there? Why do I care? About this, or what's making me care about this, or do I care enough about them? Sometimes we don't even care what they're going through. We just go, oh my gosh, we get to in our own journey. We're like, oh my God, I got triggered. Well, what's going on with them? Do we even care about that? You know, so really being able to pinpoint what am I mirroring back is I remember I was when we do our twin flame talk, I'll talk more about it, but in a twin flame experience, and we were completely mirroring each other, but it was mirroring avoidance of each other, really, is what we were doing. I'm avoiding him and he's avoiding me. And all of a sudden I'm like, well, why am I doing that? Now you might find that once you stop, it can get worse because now they're going to tap into the next thing they're going to do, and now either you're going to start to mirror that, or can you align the whole thing to a higher consciousness? And that's what we're always trying to do. And sometimes you're going to be able to, sometimes you're going to have to leave it where it is right now because you might not be ready to do that yet. That doesn't mean you're never going to do that. Just right now, it might not be the right time to do that. But you have to be able to step away from the mirror, look at the behavior you are mirroring, and why are you doing it? Don't worry about what they're doing. If you stop doing it, technically they will stop doing it. They might shift to something else. Probably they will, depending on where they're at in their journey or what timeline they're on. But a lot of it is just looking at ourselves and why are we doing it? We're doing it for a reason. Sometimes we just don't want to let them go. We're afraid if we stop playing the game, they will go play the game with someone else. And we still want to be on the chessboard. We don't want to be we still want to be on the board. We don't want to be cleared off the board. So we stay in it. And we continue the mirroring. And then you see that all the time in videos. Oh, we're mirroring. Okay, that's great. But what are you going to do about it? Ascension is doing what are we going to do about it? Not, oh, look at what we're all doing. That's more spirituality to me. Oh, look, this is what we're all doing. We're all doing this. Okay, what are we going to do about it? Ascension is, Marissa would say, it's boots on the ground. What are you going to do about it? And once we can get to what are we going to do about it? And that might take months to figure out what you're going to do about it. That might not be a decision you can come to immediately, because you don't want to go too quick. You don't want to be too in your ego with, well, I'm going to do this. And you're totally on the other extreme, and that's not aligned. So you need to set with it and really figure that out and kind of lay that out. And I'm going to kick back to Marissa to sign off. So hopefully that'll assist.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Just put it down. I love it. Just put the ball down. Someone's trying to throw the ball at you, it's covered in mud or it's covered in shit. Just put it down for a minute and then find out what your stake is or whatever, like what's going on. I love that. Just walk away, put it down for a minute. So thank you. So just to share with everyone, we're going to have a week or two where Annette is going to be off grid doing some important stuff. And we're going to have some guests. Universe said, let's keep it going. Let's bring in some other energy for fun for us all. So we're going to have some really neat other way showers. We're going to have a brother come on. So we'll have some male energy, which will be very nice. And with everything we were just talking about with the mirroring, to close us, that brings us back to the judgment piece, because if we're judging what's going on, or we're judging what's going on, like, what did I do to create this? Or we're judging them, you know, we have to, this is part of that deprogramming of human aspect, really deep core essence programming of like needing to define everything, and that kind of, what is it, it's like binaural, or I can't think of the word right now, but where there is only one or two options, where we're only looking at things like this or that, black or white, and that's the human, kind of linear, like compartmentalized. So remember to keep to open it. So, oh yeah, well my initial interpretation of this is this, but when I open and bring in other aspects, I'm seeing, look at this pattern and look at this dynamic and so on. So judging can be also how we're trying to define or yeah, because trying to define something can sometimes bring a sense of comfort because then we understand, but we want to make sure we're continuing to evolve that understanding too and keep expanding it, like beyond like what we could, keep asking, what else is this? What else is this? What else? More, like the little kids, like you ask the little kids, like, or little kids always ask us, why? Why? Get into that. Then you will go really deep if you go on that. So, just to wrap us up here, judgments are here in various forms at every stage of the game until a certain point. So, if you can just kind of think of this as like a marathon, not a sprint, this is a long sum game, like hydrate, take good care, bring a good attitude, have fun, bring snacks, always gotta bring your snacks, you know, and have fun with it and keep leveling up. Don't be surprised when you are judging something again or you return back to something possibly. It's a spiral up still. Don't get hung up on it. When you see or you stumble on more as you go, programs rise in more a rapid, like I talked about that whack-a-mole kind of concept, and you don't want to judge what's happening, thinking, oh, fuck, I just regressed, or, I thought I was further ahead than this. What's happening? So you always got to like really watch where the mind wants to try to dictate the whole scene of the movie. um, and give yourself more space. So the more you grow, the more you learn, the more you see, the more you're able to choose not to judge something, the more free and the more room you create inside to learn, to receive increased heightened experiences. This is the raising of your light quotient and thus your increased bandwidth, and thus higher aspects of higher frequencies can start to anchor in more, right? And be with you more and become one with you as they have always been. um, and we are the only limit. Remember, the mindset, we are the only limit within. And then of course we have to take into consideration that we're here in a physical experience on a physical planet, right? So then there are laws of nature and physicality, but there are also loopholes with all of these laws, but we're co-creating our experience as a divine sentient being on the earth, in this amazing quantum playground, if you will. So we are only limited by our own beliefs, really, and then understanding, the balancing with divine law and being in the physical. um, so I thank you all so much for joining us. And I thank you, Annette. This was so amazing. And I hope you all are doing great after the eclipse. And some buzzwords, I just realized it'd be helpful to say that the stuff that's been happening, that's really significant today that we're encapsulating in this is about the North Node. Anytime you have any aspects happening with the evolutionary astrology with the North Node, it's a major turning point for us. The dial of destiny is turning, so we can jump on now, almost like hop on that ferry, and go to the next destination, whether that destination takes years or it's overnight or you're only with it in your dreams, whatever. But that's the opportunity right now, is to go with more of the calling of the higher calling of the North Node. So thank you, Annette, so much. We're gonna miss you, but I know you're gonna have fun. And we'll be here waiting. And now I feel like we have like 3 more shows just from today that we can do. So thank you. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. We love you and we appreciate you. Hang in. Have fun.
Bye.